Ryu said, "Fine, I'm the Black Scythe. Is that enough?" Once Ryu admitted that he was the Black Scythe, Poppering's expression changed, and a message from the system appeared to that man. "The target you are currently looking at is telling the truth." It was all thanks to the truth rune he had. The man who was next to him turned to him and asked, "What did it say?" The man who had the truth rune said it said, "It's the truth." At his words, the executives looked at the Black Scythe with surprised eyes, and they said to themselves, "I can't believe it, but it seems to be true." They were somewhat surprised by the slightly awkward reality. The man who arrogantly acted up talking to Black Scythe a minute ago was the only one making a face as if was chewing poop, and he said to himself, "Well, I'll be damned. Damn it. I can't keep my mouth shut. To think I would annoy someone who might become a cafe executive." And he thought, if Black Scythe became a member, it was obvious that he would get kicked. Then he asked himself, what should I do? Should I apologize for my mistake? Oh no, maybe he didn't hear it. He's still just standing there quietly, right? Then he first greeted him, saying, "Black Scythe, it's a pleasure to meet you." But Ryu aimed his scythe at him and said, "It's not the time for greetings. You said you want to confirm if I'm the Black Scythe, right? Then let's confirm it through our skills." The man was taken aback and said, "Skills?" In reality, challenging level 40 to level 20 was just child's play and would be a one-sided massacre. Then the man said to himself, "The intention is clear. Darn it. He is obviously holding a grudge from earlier, and he thought that Ryu clearly intended to embarrass him in front of others. So he said to himself, there is no way I would do this. Let's just apologize sincerely." Then he said, "I'm truly sorry for my rudeness earlier, Black Scythe." Ryu said, "You're sorry? How would that help you check if I'm the Black Scythe?" Another intervened and said, "There is no need to show your skills. The verification has already been completed." But Black Scythe's anger did not go away, and he asked, "You just asked me and it was confirmed?" The man who had the truth rune said, "Ah, well, I have a rune related to that." Then Ryu said, "Okay, but I can't let this slide. If you block my attack, I'll treat your rude behavior as if it has never happened. Then shall we begin?" The man said, "Well, Black Scythe Nim, there's no need for that, I'm really sore." But before the man could apologize for his mistake, with a chilling sound, his head fell to the ground. When their colleague's head rolled under their feet, the two were in shock. Lost Yak wanted to shout, "What the hell is this guy doing?" But if he did, he might end up like that man, so shut his eyes in pain. The man who had the truth rune felt the same way, and he said to himself, "I didn't even see him swing the scythe. It was a clear gap." Then one said, "Black Scythe, what on earth are you doing?" Ryu said, "What am I doing? I just proved with my skills that I'm the Black Scythe." At that time, they thought they could be next, but they were sad because one of the executives just died so easily, and there was no resurrection here, as in the other world. They were not members who could be just replaced. They were executives. They can't just find replacements. And they asked themselves, who are we going to replace him with? The moment they thought that a madman in a white mask appeared in their field of vision. The Black Scythe was the perfect candidate for an executive position. In fact, they had come here to recruit him in the first place. Then they said to themselves, but how can accept a lunatic who kills his comrades as an executive? Chairman probably wouldn't agree either. He cares more about the lives of his subordinates. It was too much of a risk to accept the Black Scythe as an ally, especially since he was a cold-blooded killer, so they didn't have much trouble deciding. The other two said to themselves, it's dangerous to accept the Black Scythe as a member. If we can't accept him, we have to kill him right here. Even though it wasn't easy, they couldn't just let it go after killing a comrade. It was the right thing to do even from the perspective of eliminating competitors. Then they exchanged glances and tacitly agreed to kill him, and said to themselves, first, pretend to surrender. That will make him lower his guard. Then we ambush him. That's the only way. But suddenly a small laugh leaked out from Ryu's mask, and said, do you really think I wouldn't suspect you when you openly showed your intention to kill me earlier? They were surprised and said, what are you talking about? Ryu said I bet you were planning to act submissive and then ambush me, right? Isn't that so? Then Ryu said, let me ask you something. Do you know why I used Huang Yongmin's name and address to apply? They replied, we don't know. Ryu smiled and said, because I wanted to lure out the executives. The executives were surprised and looked at each other and asked Ryu, what do you want from us? Ryu replied, it's simple. I want you to die. If it had been someone else, they might have dismissed it as a joke, but the opponent was the Black Scythe. He was definitely not someone to joke with. He had already killed one of the executives as an example. Above all, he had that crazy look in his eyes. Then they said to themselves, "What should we do? Let's think. If we stay like this, we're as good as dead." And one of them, usually the logical one, tried to calmly assess the situation. However, in such a panic situation, there was no way for his mind to work properly, especially in such urgent situations, and he said, "Let's try to persuade him for now. Persuade him and buy some time." Although Black Scythe had killed someone out of the blue, maybe they could still talk it out. That was their hope. But just as the Emin was about to speak with that thought in mind, he unintentionally exclaimed, "Huh?" That's because Lost Yak had also become a headless corpse, and in an instant 2 corpses were under his feet, and only 3 people remained in the corridor. Trembling Huang Yongmin, the man who had the Truth Rune, and the Grim Reaper. Then the man said to himself, he was trying to lure us in to kill us from the beginning, and fear filled his eyes as he faced the harsh reality. And he asked Ryu, "Why? Do you have such a grudge against us?" Ryu said, "You're asking me why?" It was, "Because you falsely accused innocent people and killed them, didn't you?" The man was shocked and said, "How did you know?" Rao said, "Did you think I wouldn't know? You killed a lot of people during your job interview tests, especially the executive interviews. You have to personally deal with innocent civilians. You guys raped and killed a lot of them," the man said, seemingly unjustly accused. They weren't innocent civilians, and they made remarks that disregarded players and belittled them. They secretly envied our abilities. Such humans who hold double standards deserve to die, Ryu asked him. "And what about you? While treating others strictly, you are lenient with yourself. Isn't that a double standard?" the man said. "What are you talking about? You don't even know me," Ryu said. "You think I don't know? I can see right through your inner thoughts with my rune." Then he raised his scythe and said, "I might not know you, but I know one thing." After that man's head fell to the ground like a grape, and Ryu said, "Only scums kill innocent people." Huang Yongmin, who was trembling, looked frightened, but Ryu looked at him and said, "There's no need to be afraid. I'll send you to your friends soon." Huang Yongmin, who had been trembling just a moment ago, now looked at Ryu Min with a determined expression and said, "How do you know my friends?" Ryu said, "Why wouldn't I? We used to hang out together. Strictly speaking, I was dragged into your group." Huang Yongmin was shocked and he asked, "What?" Ryu smiled at Huang Yongmin, who was looking at him as if asking what kind of bullshit he was saying, and he said, "Don't you know who I am?" Huang Yongmin said, "You're Black Scythe." Huang Yongmin's words were cut abruptly as he looked at the face revealed behind the mask. It was a face he knew very well. At that moment, Ryu said, "It's me, Ryu Min, the one you used to torment." Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel financially. Yongmin freeze up like statues, and he said, "Ryu Min? The Black Scythe. Ryu Min?" he uttered, while the scenes from his memory were overlapping in his mind. One was of Ryu Min, hunched over like a turtle. The other was of the Black Scythe, exuding an overwhelming charisma while slashing his arm. These two seemingly incongruous images pointed to the same individual standing before him. Then he said, "The same person? It can't be. Ryu Min, the nerdy guy, is the Black Scythe." Even after blinking his eyes a few times, there was no doubt that the unmasked man was indeed Ryu Min. Then Ryu said, "It seems hard to believe for you that I'm the Black Scythe." And he added, "Well, it makes sense. Until last year, I was the one who got beaten by you," Huang Yongmin inquired, his voice quivering with a mix of emotions. What are you? Have you been deceiving me all this time? Why pretend to be a fool?" Ryu retorted. "What are you talking about? When did I pretend to be a fool?" And in the midst of their conversation, Ryu Min's scythe spun around, and Huang Yongmin's arm fell to the ground. The shock of losing his arm left Huang Yongmin momentarily speechless. Then Ryu said, with voice carried a chilling edge, "It's unpleasant to hear words like fool from trash like you, isn't it?" Huang Yongmin, stammering in pain, could only manage a feeble response. "Stop." But Ryu said, "Be quiet, unless you want your tongue cut out." Huang Yongmin held back tears and endured the pain, while the blood leaked out from the cut. Then Ryu's hand moved swiftly to administer first aid, stopping the bleeding and healing Huang's arm. And he smiled and said, "Oh, You're one-armed now? Hwang Yong-min, having failed to reattach his severed arm, had tears in his eyes. Ryu looked at him and said, "So what? You can still live with one arm, right?" Although Ryu Min's actions seemed designed to shame him, Hwang Yong-min remained emotionally numb, overwhelmed by the situation. Then Hwang Yong-min asked, "Is it really you?" "The Ryu Min I knew." He was searching for a glimmer of the familiar in this transformed figure, Ryu replied, his voice devoid of sentiment. "No, the Ryu Min you knew is no longer here." After these words, Ryu slowly raised his scythe, akin to an executioner preparing to carry out a sentence, and said, "Goodbye." Hwang Yong-min's voice was desperate, pleading for a chance at redemption. "Wait, just a moment, Mina. Please spare me. I've caused you a lot of trouble, haven't I? I was wrong. I'm truly sorry." The scythe, previously in motion, hesitated in midair, and Ryu leaned in, appearing to consider Hwang Yong-min's plea, and said, "Is that so?" At that moment, Hwang Yong-min saw a glimmer of hope and thought, and said to himself, "Maybe I can survive this." Then he continued, carefully choosing his words, "You have nothing to gain from killing me. Why not use me?" Ryu's curiosity was piqued, and he said, "Use you? How so?" Hwang Yong-min quickly responded, "Well, I'll be your exclusive assistant. I'll obey your every command, run errands, act as bait during hunts, whatever you need." Ryu pondered for a moment, stroking his chin, while Hwang Yong-min held his breath in anticipation. But hope was short-lived. As Ryu said, "It's still not going to work." Hwang Yong-min's expression sank, and he asked, What do you mean?" Ryu said, "You still intend to strike me from behind, don't you?" Hwang Yong-min was left dumbfounded and said to himself, "How did he know? Did he guess?" Then Ryu said, "You can't keep a dog that tries to bite its owner." With these words, Ryu raised his scythe, and Hwang Yong-min's face contorted in desperation. And he said, "Wait, just a moment." But Ryu said, "Your worth as a pawn ends here." And with one wave, Yong-min's head flew off. It was a pitiful and insignificant end to a once tangled fate. Then Ryu's cold voice echoed in the air as he aside, "I gave you countless chances. In the previous regressions, back when he didn't have the rune of inner thoughts, Ryu Min had spared Hwang Yong-min, who had been deceived by his silver tongue. But as expected, it ended with betrayal." Then Ryu chuckled inwardly and said, "I was such a sucker back then, and only after my death did I realize how foolish I had been to spare Hwang Yong-min." Of course, this was a tale from a time when his level and experience were much lower than they were now. And he said, "Goodbye, you bastard. And now, I need to clean up this mess." Utilizing his skill to erase any traces, Ryu made the 4 lifeless bodies vanish from the scene. It appeared that no one had detected their presence, as there were no witnesses to be seen. After that, Ryu stowed away his scythe once again and donned his disguise. With this, he had successfully accomplished his goal of dealing with Hwang Yong-min and the Player Haven Cafe executives. Now he was one step closer to the position of the chairman. Well, it wasn't just one step. It was more like a series of steps. And he said to himself, "Should I pay a visit to his house?" With that thought, Ryu swiftly disappeared into the darkness. In the next day, people began to gather in the cafe meeting room. Then Yamti said, "Welcome, Chairman Nim." But the chairman didn't welcome her and said, "Come on in, Yamti." Yamti, with a smile on her face, scanned the room, but couldn't help noticing that some of the other executives were missing. And she asked, "Where are the other executives?" Before the chairman could reply, he let out a sigh. Then he said, "It's precisely because of that issue that we had to convene this meeting urgently." And he added, "The executives have been killed." Yamti was shocked and asked, "What? They're dead?" And she stared at the room once more. There were empty seats, and the executives, who were never late, were absent today. Then she asked, "What happened? Have you tried calling them?" The chairman replied, "We checked, but they're not answering individual calls either. It seems they were attacked while going for interviews." Yamti thought of one person and said, "So who did it? Could it be?" As if to confirm her suspicions, the chairman nodded and said, "That's right, Black Scythe, he's hunting our cafe members." Strictly speaking, they weren't regular members but executives. However, the chairman wasn't concerned about that distinction. What mattered was that the cafe they had painstakingly built was under attack, and it was by none other than the Black Scythe, who was considered the #1 player in the other world. Then Yamti asked, "What about Sobaru?" and Poppering. They were killed by him too? The chairman replied. That's correct, she said sadly. Why? What could those good people have done wrong? The chairman said, why do murderers commit murder? It's just for their own satisfaction. Or maybe they saw us as a threat, gaining influence. Listening to the chairman's explanation, Yamti could understand to some extent. There were people with twisted personalities who, when others' success seemed too prominent, wanted to snatch it away. And she asked, did he join our cafe just to lure the executives? The chairman replied, yes. Then she added, I was looking forward to meeting Black Scythe someday, but now I find out he's a psychopath who's hostile to us. I feel really ashamed. If we had accepted him as an executive, it could have been a disaster. The chairman said, that's right. I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. Maybe even before that, he would have killed me. Losing the executives seemed to have put the chairman in a bad mood. And he said, Black Scythe is now our clear enemy. We must find him and avenge our lost members. But with an assured tone, Yamti asked, yes, we have to do that. But is it certain that the Black Scythe is the culprit? The chairman replied, there are eyewitnesses. And he called out saying, Lost Yak Nim, as you reported to me, please explain the situation to Yamti Nim. Lost Yak said, of course, and with a gloomy expression described the confrontation with the Black Scythe. Then the chairman left the room and Lost Yak exchanged greetings with Yamti, saying, Yamti Nim, we'll see you next time. She said, yes, please take a rest. You've had a tough day today, Lost Yak Nim. After everyone left, Lost Yak said to himself, fortunately, it seems they didn't notice. And he opened his equipment window and pressed the button to remove his helmet. Suddenly, his face returned to its original appearance. It was no longer the gray-skinned Lost Yak. It was Ryu in all his glory. Then Ryu chuckled and said, I guess I've got a knack for acting, and he gazed at the item he had just unequipped. Assassin's Mask. Category, helmet. Grade, unique. Description, a thin, translucent mask. Favored by assassins, boasting an astounding 99.9% success rate. They say no one can unveil the true face behind it. Defense. 1. Effect. By saying the trigger word, disguise, it lets you mimic the appearance of a player you've dispatched, down to their facial features, skin tone, voice, and physique, all flawlessly replicated. Durability, 3,000 out of 3,000. Usage restriction. Requires an expert or higher-grade Ryu had chosen this helmet as his reward from the previous time attack event, using a unique item selection ticket. Even though it lacked stats and provided minimal defense, its perks were invaluable. Then Ryu said, being able to transform into the appearance of a player I've slain is a major advantage. And it wasn't just about deceiving opponents. It had versatile applications, from gathering information to espionage and deception. In essence, it was the ideal mask for assassination. And he added with a smile, there's no easier assassination than betraying allies. That was precisely why Ryu killed the executives today, as he needed to infiltrate their ranks as one of the executives. Then he said, now, I can even turn into Hwang Yong-min if needed. But for now, I'd stay focused on playing the role of Lost Yak. And he continued saying, if I hadn't delved into Lost Yak's inner thoughts earlier, I wouldn't have been able to fool the other executives. As his speech patterns, habits, and social connections had all been meticulously unraveled by the rune of inner thoughts in previous regressions. That's how he'd managed to play the role of Lost Yak. And without the assassin's mask, this intricate plan would have been impossible. Then Ryu said, now, all that remained was seizing the right moment and taking over the position of chairman. Don't forget to like and subscribe and wait for the next part. After Ryu played the role of Lost Yak and fooled everyone, he decided to go to the chairman's house. But after thinking for a moment, he gave up on this idea and said to himself, if it were up to me, I'd eliminate the chairman, assume his identity, and effortlessly manipulate the organization. But that was proven impossible because the assassin's mask only targets players, and the chairman wasn't a player. It was an ironic twist that the leader of a player-filled organization wasn't a player himself. Also, approaching him was no easy task, thanks to player Yamti. Then Ryu added, I can't deal with Yamti's abilities with my current capabilities, and until then, I'll stick to playing the role of Lost Yak, and he likely wouldn't be transforming to Lost Yak until the next meeting. So he has got some spare time now. And with the newfound free time, there was something he had to do. It's related to recovering durability. The Bead of Eternity, a remarkable item, bestows stat points for killing monsters. And for every monster you kill, the durability drops by 1 point. And once that durability is depleted, the necklace vanishes. That's its one shortcoming, but only when its durability wanes. And if one can restore durability, there's no better stat-boosting item. That's why it's a tailor-made item for blacksmiths. And with the repair skill, you can endlessly mend durability and strive for permanent stat gains. But this necklace isn't easy to acquire, as if you fail to defeat an orc shaman in the 5th round, the chance to obtain it eludes you. But there's no law that says only blacksmiths can benefit from it. Recovering durability is possible for anyone. That was the reason Ryu wanted to go abroad, because there was a blacksmith overseas who would become famous for being the best. And he said, I need to ask that person to fix the durability of the bead. With this goal in mind, Ryu promptly prepared for his overseas journey. Observing Ryu Min packing his suitcase, his younger sibling inquired with curiosity, Hey, what are you up to? Where are you headed? Ryu replied, Just a quick trip abroad. I'll be back soon. 3 days should suffice. His younger sibling asked, What's the reason for your trip? Business-related? Ryu replied, Well, you could say that. Then his sibling said, I was thinking of joining you if it was for leisure, but it doesn't seem feasible. Ryu smiled and said, Who goes on vacation in times like these? And he added, Make sure to eat well while I'm away. His sibling asked, But where are you off to? Ryu chuckled and replied, The UK. In the UK, Russell Daniel had long forsaken formal education. For 6 years, he had dwelled in a rustic cabin amidst the woods, honing his blacksmithing skills. The clang of the hammer meeting red-hot iron resonated through the air, and this was the craft of shaping and strengthening. At that time, Russell was fashioning a 15-centimeter-long dagger, and when its shape met his approval, he used a whetstone to sharpen the blade. Subsequently, he plunged the blade into the water after heating only its edge in the fiery forge. This process elevated the blade's sharpness. Now, it's complete. Gazing at the finely crafted dagger, Russell let out a wistful chuckle and said, It'd be nice if I could sell at least one a day. Then he said, Well, I did anticipate this turn of events. After all, making a living as a blacksmith was never a walk in the park, as the costs of blacksmithing materials were no trifling matter. He had persevered thus far, but now he reached his limits. His bank balance also was plummeting, and he wished not to burden his parents any further. And he said, Perhaps it's time to explore a different profession. And without thinking, Russell turned around and suddenly he was taken aback. Instead of a wild animal, a person was approaching, and not just any person, but someone of Asian descent. T. Russell said to himself, What? It's not common to see people here. However, he wasn't sure if they could communicate, but he decided to start a conversation, and he asked, What's the matter? Are you lost? Ryu spoke fluent English and said, Russell Daniel, right? The young, famous blacksmith. Russell's expression grew cold and asked, Who are you? Ryu smiled and said, It seems I've found the right person based on your reaction. Then Russell asked, Where did you hear about me? I don't have any Asian customers. Ryu replied, I didn't hear about you. I saw you. Russell said in amazement, Saw me? Ryu said, I'm a prophet. I can see the future. Russell said to himself, A prophet? What nonsense is this person talking about? Then Ryu added, Russell, level 21, occupation, blacksmith, area designation, CU key 008. Is that correct? Russell remained silent, unable to speak due to his shock, and his eyes widened in disbelief. Then he said to himself, To accurately guess the area designation, even details I've never disclosed to anyone, it seems saying he's a prophet isn't just a baseless claim. And he asked Ryu, Can you really see the future? Ryu replied, Yes. Russell said, I've never heard of a profession like prophet. Ryu said, That's because it's rare. In this other world, there are countless professions. Among them, there's a unique class that only one person can have. That class is prophet. Then Russell said, Okay, and why have you come here, Mr. Prophet? Ryu said, Don't ridicule me like that. Russell, I've come because I want to strike a deal with you. Russell inquired, A deal? Ryu said, Yes. Please use your repair skill to fix one item for me. If you do that, I'll provide you with valuable information. Russell said in amazement, Information? and he asked, "What kind of valuable information?" Ryu replied, "It's information about the 6th round." Russell's eyes widened, and he said to himself, "If I can know about the next round in advance, it will be of great help to plan ahead." Honestly, it wasn't a difficult task. It was easier than blacksmithing, as all he needed to do was touch the item and cast a skill. But being cautious by nature when it came to interpersonal relationships, Russell couldn't help but be wary. And he said to himself, "The problem is that it's too easy." And the benefit outweighed the simplicity of the task, as information about the 6th round was a significant advantage. Then he asked Ryu, "Are you really offering 6th round information in exchange for repairing an item's durability?" Ryu replied, "Yes." Russell looked at Ryu with suspicion and said, "Isn't that too good to be true? Are you sure there isn't another motive?" Ryu chuckled and said to himself, "Typical Russell." Even though it was a no-risk proposition, he doubted and remained cautious. And he said to Russell, "I could have been disappointed if you had just accepted it without suspicion." And Ryu continued saying, "May I be a bit straightforward? I want to become friends with you." Russell was surprised and asked, "What?" Ryu said, "I saw it in the future. You, reaching the pinnacle as a blacksmith." Russell said, "Me? Reaching the pinnacle?" Whether Russell's eyes widened or not, Ryu Min continued saying, "You survive up to the 15th round without anyone's help. It's an impressive feat, but that's all it is. After that, you have no future. It's a bleak prospect, but I can help you. If you join hands with me, you can grow more easily, even beyond the 15th round, even the blacksmithing life you desire." Just a while ago, Russell didn't believe a word this Asian man was saying. He thought it might be a trick, but when he accurately guessed his wish, his thoughts changed. Then he asked, "What do you want from me?" Ryu smiled warmly and said, "I don't want much, just helping each other." In fact, unlike the more unique classes like Buffer, Mercenary King, and Dark Knight, the blacksmith class is a common class. This means there are a lot of other blacksmiths that can replace Russell. However, Ryu had a specific reason for embarking on a journey deep into the mountains of England. It boiled down to one simple fact: Russell was a rare talent, and the story about Russell surviving up to the 15th round was far from fiction. He had not only defied the odds, but also reached the pinnacle of the blacksmith class. Then Ryu said to himself, although he never hit max level and eventually met his end, he was the last blacksmith standing. And if I can maintain a friendly relationship with such a talent, it would be incredibly advantageous as they progressed through the rounds. Furthermore, repairing the durability of the necklace was an added benefit. Then Ryu cast a thoughtful glance at Russell. He seems to be torn between trusting him and doubting himself. For times like these, Ryu's grasp of English honed through countless regressions came in handy. And with a fluent voice, Ryu made his proposition, saying, "What I'm requesting isn't too demanding. Just help with occasional equipment maintenance and cast a few skills when needed. In return, I'll provide you with information about the next round. By doing so, you can rapidly enhance your strength, taking advantage of missed opportunities from the past." Russell hesitated, pondering the tantalizing offer of receiving future information in exchange for the use of his skills. However, his primary concern was trust, and he said to himself, "Ryu Min seems honest when he speaks, but can I really trust him?" Then Russell, caught in a dilemma, offered a compromise and said, "Thank you for valuing my future, but I'm not entirely convinced yet. So, here's my proposal. I'll decide whether to continue the deal based on the results of round 6. Ryu said, "Do whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm not asking you to sign a contract." And Ryu wore a confident smile, believing that once Russell saw the prophecy come true, he would have no choice but to rely on him, just like Heavenly Demon. Russell added, "First, let me repair your items, and you can give me the information for round 6 afterward." Rao said, "All right, here," and he retrieved the Bead of Eternity from his inventory. With only one durability remaining, it was on the brink of shattering. Without even checking the item's information, Russell immediately cast a skill. As the bead briefly emitted light, the repair was complete. Then Russell said, "I've fixed everything here." Ryu accepted the item and checked its information. The durability was now 1,000, fully restored. Ryu smiled and said to himself, "Great, now I can start stacking again." At that time, Russell said to himself, I don't know what kind of necklace this is, but it seems quite valuable if he's willing to go through all of this trouble to repair its durability. Although Russell could have easily read the item's information, he had chosen not to, respecting the customer's privacy. It was a professional and ethical approach. Then Ryu said, thank you. The durability is fully restored now. Russell said, now can you provide me with information for round 6? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support the channel financially. And wait for the next part. Ryu said, of course. The 6th round is a quest, and he began unveiling various advanced information. Each revelation caused Russell's pupils to widen and contract repeatedly. Russell said, if what you just said is true, I should try to gather strong allies as much as possible. Ryu said yes, that would probably be helpful. The monsters are exceptionally powerful. Then Russell nodded reluctantly, but deep down he still harbored doubts about whether the prophecy would come true. Reading his thoughts, Ryu said to himself, well, he won't believe it until he experiences it firsthand. And Ryu remained patient, knowing that Russell would find out the truth after round 6. And to survive, he will have no choice but to grasp the thread of the prophet. Then Russell asked, is the deal complete with this? Ryu said yes, but would you consider selling me some items? Russell inquired, items? Ryu asked him, do you have black iron dust by any chance? Russell had been cautious until now, but this time he couldn't help but be astonished. And he said to himself, he actually saw that too. Did he foresee all the items inside my inventory too? Russell didn't know that predicting the contents of someone's inventory was even possible. However, his astonishment didn't stop there. As Ryu said, that item, sell it to me. I know you're looking for work because you're short on cash. I'll pay you generously, Russell said in amazement. You know that I'm looking for a job too? It wasn't a prophecy. Ryu was actually reading his thoughts, but to Russell, it made little difference. Then Russell said, I'm genuinely amazed now. I believe you're the prophet, and I apologize. Honestly, I had my doubts, thinking you might be trying to trick me. Ryu said, no need to apologize. I only speak of what I've seen in the future. Whether you believe me or not is your choice. Then Russell asked himself, he won't be wrong about the information for round 6 either, will he? With those words, Russell, who had been deep in thought, raised his head as if he had made up his mind, and he said, do you need black iron dust? I'll just give it to you. Ryu said, you're giving it to me just like that? Russell said, I feel like I've received more than I've given. I'm not that shameless, you know. It seemed that he had belatedly realized the value of the information he received about round 6. Then Russell, with a smile, took out the black iron dust from his inventory and said, take it. Without hesitation, Ryu Min accepted it, and the item's information came up. Black iron dust. Category: inventory. Description: black-colored iron dust. Faint magical energy can be sensed. Then Ryu said to himself, he's giving away this valuable item just like that. Strictly speaking, he had given it as compensation for the information. However, Russell was unaware of the value that black iron dust held. In fact, it's a material that falls into the god tier after all. And it might be an item that could easily be obtained after round 11, but for now it was difficult to come by. And the likelihood of finding it by killing monsters, as Russell did, was slim. Then Ryu asked Russell, are you sure about giving this to me for free? Russell replied, I'm perfectly fine with it. Honestly, I don't even know what it's used for. Only you, as the prophet, would know how valuable this item is. In fact, Russell had a hunch after all. As he knew if Ryu is demanding it specifically, it must be quite important. But he didn't ask deliberately. He also didn't seek to find out, and he thought that asking for more after already receiving help would be greedy. Drawing a clear line and not crossing it, that's Russell's strength. Ryu, who had been smiling, extended a bag and said, take it. Russell, who had received it unexpectedly, opened the bag and said, wow, inside was a total of 20,000 pounds. And Ryu said, you gave me an item for free, so I'm giving you this as a payment for the repair job. I think it should cover the cost, right? Russell mumbled and then replied quickly, more than enough. And he said to himself, I won't need to look for a job with this amount. Russell's gaze at Ryu quickly turned friendly. Realizing his situation, Russell hesitated and spoke up belatedly. But is it okay for me to accept such a large sum of money? Ryu said, it's perfectly fine. I didn't give you that much money just for the job. It's for the item you gave me too. Actually, it's not a waste to give him even millions, but if it's too much, it'll feel burdensome for him. Then Ryu added, Of course, I didn't give you this much money just to use it for food, Russell inquired. What? Ryu said open an overseas stock account and invest about half of the money I gave you in Korean stocks. The company's name is Player Place. It will soon become a big hit, so if you invest, you won't have to worry about looking for a job for the rest of your life. Well, it's up to you whether to believe it or not. Russell said, I believe you. Your words as the prophet must be infallible. Besides, it's money I've received without any effort. When Ryu witnessed his commitment, he could finally take a step back from the negotiations. And he said, well, it seems my business here is concluded, Russell Daniel. I wish you luck in the next round. And he added, oh, do you have a cell phone? Russell said, of course. Ryu said, then I'll share my number with you. Please save it. After some days, as always, that day arrived. June 1st, midnight. Just like before, Ryu, summoned to this world, cast his gaze around, and he said to himself, round 6 is a cooperative round. I need to find people to collaborate with. Then he scanned his surroundings and employed his tracking skill. The first person he located was Minjuri. If he had to form a party, she was an essential presence. In reality, besides Minjuri, there's no one else he need, but he needed to fill in the required number of party members, as the rule for this round was to assemble a 5-person party. At that time, Minjuri spotted Ryu and approached, waving her hand, and said, it's nice to see you like this. How have you been? Ryu said. You're talking as if it's been ages since we met. She smiled and said, but it's been a month, hasn't it? Now, Minjuri smiled without any fear. After all, their partnership had been excellent in the previous round. Then Ryu looked around and noticed that people's eyes were directed at them. One of them said, who's that woman? Why is she talking to Black Scythe? Another said, democracy? Is she such a high-ranking player to be talking to Black Scythe? Another said, come to think of it, I think I saw her during the last round's result announcement. I think she was in second place. I'm envious. To have a connection with a top-ranked player like that. Ryu didn't pay any attention to it, but Black Scythe was popular among the players. Being the unchanging number 1 in rankings and possessing a cold charisma, he was someone everyone wanted to befriend. That actually was a bit troublesome, but Ryu Min had only thought about it in his mind. He hadn't actually done anything about it, and the reason was simple. As Black Scythe had been too intimidating, and an unfathomable aura had surrounded him like a barrier. However, Minjuri seemed unaffected and continued talking. Did you defeat the final boss in the last round? Ryu said, I did. Minjuri added, even though the time was tight, you defeated it quickly, right? Then, have you completed the subquest to gather balance stones? Ryu said, I completed it. By the way, I won't tell you what rewards I got. She asked in amazement, how did you know I was going to ask that? Ryu replied, just a hunch. Then she said, I've always felt this, but you really seem to have deep insight, Black Scythe. Silence followed. And Minjuri only realized then that the atmosphere had turned strange, and she asked herself, what did I say? Did I say something wrong? How embarrassing. Belatedly, embarrassment washed over her, and her face turned red, and she said, I said something too presumptuous, didn't I? I'm sorry, Ryu said. What's there to apologize for? And anyway, thanks for the compliment. With that, she said to herself, he's considerate yet exudes charisma. Anyway, he's a fascinating person. At that moment, 2 players approached Black Scythe and said, hello, Black Scythe. The person who approached Ryu Min wasn't anyone else but Seo Arin and Ansang Cheol. Then Seo Arin said, it's been a while, Black Scythe. Her eyes briefly glancing at Minjuri, and she asked, but who's this? Ryu said coldly, I don't think I need to explain, do I? Seo Arin's smile, though seemingly in agreement, concealed her true feelings. She was telling herself, why is he smiling at her and not me? Seo Arin couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment at the cold reception. Then Ryu asked, but what do you want from me? He acted as if he didn't know the reason, even though he did. And he said to himself, they probably came because I forecasted as a prophet that Black Scythe would party with them. On the other hand, Seo Arin and Ansang Cheol were deliberating on how to respond. Since they couldn't openly discuss the prophecy, they chose their words carefully. And after a moment of hesitation, Ansang Cheol finally spoke up. Black Scythe, honestly, we want to party with you. Ryo inquired, party? With me? And Sang Cheol said, yes. We'll just be in the way, but we promise we'll do our best not to cause any trouble for you, Black Scythe. Seo Arin and An Sang Cheol were sincere in their request. The prophecy had stated that Black Scythe needed to join their party to have an easier time with round 6, and they couldn't afford to back down now. Ryu pretended to ponder the request, tapping his chin. In reality, their presence in the party was inconsequential. Whether they joined or not made little difference since there were plenty of eager volunteers. And he thought of the potential benefits, as Ansang Cheol will report this development to Heavenly Demon. Then Ryu said to himself, it wouldn't hurt to build a positive image for the future. Though he had already made up his mind, Ryu pretended to hesitate, making it an intense situation for those watching. With growing impatient, Ansang Cheol made a proposal and said, we won't ask to join the party for free. I have information about round 6. If you let us join the party, I'm willing to share the information. Ryu smiled and said to himself, what you're trying to share with me is what I told you. Then he said to Ansang Cheol, I don't need it. Ansang Cheol looked puzzled, unaware of this fact, and he asked, why don't you need it? Wouldn't it be helpful to know how to pass round 6 in advance? Ryu replied, I'll strategize in my own way. I don't rely on unreliable information. Seeing Ansang Cheol's flustered state, Ryu couldn't resist playing a little prank, and he asked, but where did you get that information? The bodyguard hesitated and said, what information are you talking about? Ryu said, the information about round 6 that you just mentioned. Who's the source? The bodyguard was caught off guard, unsure how to respond. Revealing the existence of the prophet would put them at risk, so he hesitated. Then Ryu added, can't you say it? If you do, I'll let you join the party. Reluctantly, the bodyguard lowered his head and said, I'm sorry. Surprisingly, it was difficult for him to speak up. Then Ryu smiled and said to himself, he won't reveal the existence of the prophet. Of course, he didn't want to mention it to avoid Heavenly Demon's wrath, but it didn't bother him much. The bodyguard, on the other hand, was crestfallen, and he said to himself, darn it, I couldn't party with Black Scythe as planned. How will he report this to the CEO? Then, unexpectedly, Ryu made a decision and said, I'll let you join the party. The bodyguard was surprised and said, you will? But why? Ryu said, I thought it might be trustworthy since you didn't reveal the source of the information. I don't like filthy rats. Realizing that exposing the prophet's existence could have backfired, the bodyguard breathed a sigh of relief. The two expressed their gratitude and said, thank you, Black Scythe, and they turned to Minjuri. It seemed they were still curious about her relationship with Black Scythe. Seeing that, Ryu said, as for her, she's a buffer in a contract relationship with me. Then they asked themselves, a contract relationship? A buffer? How did they meet up? They had many questions, but they decided to inquire about the contract first. And they said, if it's a contract relationship, Ryu said, yes, there is such a thing. At that moment, their curiosity subsided. It seemed Ryu wouldn't disclose more details, even if they asked. Then Seo Arin shifted her gaze toward Minjuri and said, hello, I'm Seo Arin. It's a pleasure to meet you. Minjuri said, oh yes, I'm Minjuri. By any chance, are you the famous Seo Arin? Did you just change your appearance? Seo Arin said, yes, that's me. Minjuri said, really? I was curious, given your identical face and name. And Minjuri was ecstatic. Meeting a TV celebrity in person was truly fascinating. And she added, oh my God, I'm a huge fan of yours. My father adores the drama you were in. He's a massive Seo Arin actress fan. Seo Arin nodded politely and said, thank you for your kind words. While Minjuri continued with excitement, the bodyguard cast a glance at Ryu and said, are you sure it's okay not to share information about round 6 with you? Ryu said coldly, I don't need it. Don't bother offering it to me. I don't want to owe you anything. The bodyguard felt a tinge of disappointment as Black Scythe drew a clear line, and he said to himself, I was planning to provide information in exchange, but if Black Scythe didn't want it, there was nothing to be done. Maybe I should discreetly advise him if he deviates from the provided information during the quest. When Ryu shared the information, he had considered offering a bit of assistance to make the prophecy come true, that if they didn't follow his words, but it seemed unnecessary now. At that time, the two women continued their conversation. And Seo Arin said, by the way, Minjuri, is your profession a buffer? Minjuri said, yes, I'm a buffer, and I'll buff everyone later. CO Aaron said I have something similar to a buff in my job too. And I'm a summoner, and I can cast shields with my fairy summons, Minjuri asked in amazement. Summoner? You have summons? CO Aaron replied. Yes, my profession is a summoner. I can summon up to 3 creatures I'll show you later. At that moment, the bodyguard interjected and said, I apologize for interrupting. I think it's important to exchange greetings. My name is Ansang Cheol. Minjuri said, Oh, nice to meet you. I saw you earlier, and it seemed like you and Black Scythe knew each other. He said, We received some help from Black Scythe. He saved both of our lives. Minjuri said, Oh, I see. And she looked at Black Scythe in surprise and said to herself, He even rescued someone who was in danger. My instincts were right, and she once again felt that Black Scythe was a surprisingly warm-hearted person. As more people gathered over time, Priscilla appeared with a burst of light and said, Hello, humans. Have you rested well for a month? And she added, There are 1,010 participants for this round, which is a perfect number. Shall we get straight to the point? Then a message window appeared before the players. Round 6. Defeat 1 boss within 6 hours. All areas. Participants, 16,120, 590 achievers, 8,062.95. Current area, CESKS007. Participants, 1,010 achievers, 0505. Then one player inquired, What's this? Defeat 1 boss? Our boss is finally coming out. Another said, How are we supposed to defeat a boss on our own? Hearing the murmurs, Priscilla chuckled and spoke. Don't worry, you can't defeat the boss on your own. Of course, you'll need to work together. One player inquired, We can't defeat it alone? Work together? How? Priscilla said. Naturally, you'll need to form parties. That's where the party system comes in. And she added, A party is a group formed to allow cooperation among its members. You need 5 members to form a party, and when you're in a party, you won't harm each other. One player said, Oh, so we won't accidentally hit each other? Priscilla said with an evil smile. That's right. No more worries about friendly fire or betrayals. That's convenient, isn't it? And she continued saying, However, attacks from other parties or monsters will still affect you. Only your party members' attacks will be nullified. The players nodded in understanding, and the quest's difficulty seemed reasonable. If you had a party of 5, defeating the boss should be manageable. Then Priscilla said, When you form a party, the experience points and gold obtained from defeating monsters are distributed evenly among party members, regardless of who delivers the killing blow. Just keep in mind that if the distance between party members exceeds 100 meters, the distribution won't occur. One player said, Oh, so experience points and gold are distributed equally? I think it's fair, though. Another asked Priscilla. So, how are items distributed then? She said, Unlike experience points or gold, items are distributed based on contribution. For example, if 2 humans contributed 70% and 30% to defeating a monster, the chances of getting an item when it drops will be proportional to those percentages. The player said so the person who contributed more to defeating the monster has a higher chance of getting the item. I see. That makes sense. Another asked. So, conversely, even if someone had a low contribution, they could still get an item if they're lucky. Priscilla replied. That's correct. Even if you contributed only 1%, you could still get an item if luck is on your side. The probability might be low, though. Then one said, Angel, I have a question. How is contribution measured? Is it all about dealing the most damage? Wouldn't that disadvantage players with lower damage output? Priscilla replied, That's a good question. While dealing more damage usually leads to higher contribution, it's not always directly proportional. The system considers all factors and makes a judgment to measure contribution. So even a player who mainly provides buffs can affect contribution. One said happily, Wow, so just giving buffs can earn you contribution. At that time, Ryu said to himself, For me now, parties are just a nuisance, but I can't say no. Then Priscilla said, By the way, if you don't form a party, even if you defeat monsters, it won't count. And as the angel had just mentioned, the system enforced party formation, so there was no option for soloing. Then Priscilla added, But that doesn't mean there are no advantages to it. The benefits of a party include the ability to rely on each other and cooperate freely. And after forming a party and defeating just one boss, you'll immediately pass the round. All 5 members, that is. One player inquired in amazement, All 5 members? Priscilla said yes, but in the current field there are 101 boss monsters released. In other words, only the 505 who defeat a boss will survive. Then the angel chuckled and clapped her hands and said, That concludes the explanation about parties. Now that you know the quest, It's nothing special, right? Just defeat one boss, and it's a straightforward quest to pass. Hearing that, a hint of amusement appeared on Ryu's lips, and he said to himself it wasn't as simple as she made it seem. And before the angel disappeared in a flash of light, she said, "Now, humans, do your best to defeat the boss. Oh, and there are no sub-quests, so keep that in mind." Then one player said, "Easy quest. My ass. This boss is going to be a real pain. Mark my words." The curses and doubts flowed freely as the angel vanished into thin air. Everyone knew by now that curses hurled in the angel's absence fell on deaf ears. The angel only appeared at the start and end of the quest, a fact well known to all. At that time, the timer on the progress window began ticking, announcing the commencement of the quest. Time remaining until round end, 05, 59, 53. And within the time limit, the party had to form and defeat the boss, or else they would meet a grim fate. At that moment, a message popped up demanding action. Form a 5-member party starting now. To create a party, hold hands with 5 people and memorize the party formation command simultaneously. Remember, defeating the boss won't count unless you form a party, so keep that in mind. Then one player said we should definitely form a party, right? Another said, "Yeah, they say defeating the boss doesn't count without one. So would you like to join my party?" He asked. "What's your level?" He said, "I'm a level 20 warrior," and people raised their hands, searching for potential party members. The scene turned into a bustling marketplace in no time. Amidst the chaos, the bodyguard pondered Ryu's prophecy, and he said to himself, "It's all unfolding, just as the prophet foretold. The 6th round requires a 5-member party." Then he cast a glance at Black Scythe by his side. He knew it was a wise choice to stick with him after hearing the prophecy, and he said, "Mr. Black Scythe, we should—" But Ryu interrupted his words and said, "Wait, since it's a 5-member party, we need to find more one player." Minjuri asked, "Who should we choose for the last spot?" The bodyguard said, "Let's leave it to Mr. Black Scythe, the strongest among us." Nodding in agreement, the others turned their attention to Ryu. Ryu pretended to ponder, but he already had a candidate in mind, someone he wished to include in the party, someone who had to be nearby so that Ryu could smoothly invite him. But suddenly one player approached and said, "Hello, Mr. Black Scythe. Would you by any chance consider joining our party?" But with a sharp tone of voice and a look that made that player's ass pump water like a fountain, Ryu said, "No, go away and don't waste my time." Dejected by the firm rejection, the players retreated with downcast faces, and that player said to himself he didn't even hesitate to reject us. How embarrassing. Damn, I was trying to get on Black Scythe's good side. The other players said to themselves, whoever gets to party with Black Scythe must be living the dream. Such thoughts circulated, but Ryu had no interest in these indecisive individuals. He already had a candidate in mind, and he said to himself, it's not about finding party members for this quest. Rather, it's about selecting the right people to fill the slots for the last round. These were connections that didn't exist in previous regressions. Originally, at this point, Ryu had never interacted with anyone, not Minjuri, not Seo Arin, not Ansang Cheol, and he said to himself back then, I would have accepted anyone to fill the slots. But now, plans have changed, because I needed to find people that would grow together with me. Although Ryo rejected the former player's offer, some players did not give up and asked Ryo to join, all in pursuit of obtaining the coveted blue chip, as the prospect of joining forces with the Black Scythe was, in essence, a guarantee of survival in this treacherous quest. But Ryo rejected them, and one by one, those who suggested forming a party were quickly brushed aside. As word spread that the Black Scythe was declining all party invitations, the number of hopeful players diminished. Then one player said to himself, damn, won't he just accept anyone? He's being way too choosy. At least hear them out before saying no, another said. But aren't those guys next to him already in his party? They've pretty much secured their survival. And disheartened players distanced themselves from the Black Scythe. Those who had witnessed the rejections did not dare to try their luck and retreated voluntarily. At this point, Ryu's party members became curious and said to themselves, who would he possibly choose for that last spot? While the bodyguard was curious, He also felt a tinge of regret and said to himself, it would have been great if Master Ma was here in this section. If they were in the same zone, he would have actively recommended him without hesitation. Minjuri shared a similar sentiment, and she said to herself, if only Ryu Min were here, I would have passionately advocated for him to take the last spot. They each had someone in mind for that last spot, but the different zones made it impossible. Then a group approached Ryu, and one said, Mr. Black Scythe, it's a pleasure to meet you again. He was Jo Young-ho, and with a smile, Ryu said, I'm pleasantly surprised to see you here. I thought you might not make it past the 5th round. He laughed and said, really? Aren't you underestimating me a bit too much? Dealing with around 300 orcs was a walk in the park. It wasn't an empty boast. Jo Young-ho had safely passed the quest, ranking 125th among the 211 participants who reached the 5th round. And he added, I was inspired by your battles back then, which motivated me to finish the hunt quickly. Ryu said, is that so? Jo Young-ho said, either way, thank you. Thanks to you, my friend here also survived without a scratch. Then one of the players who had benefited from the Black Scythe's emergency treatment, Mangi, stepped forward, and he said, Mr. Black Scythe, I'm grateful for your help with my shoulder back then. Thanks to you, I could extend my lifespan like this. Ryu said, you managed to take down 300 with that body of yours. Mangi said, it's all thanks to you, Mr. Black Scythe. I'm truly grateful. You're my savior. And with a friendly gaze, Jo Young-ho turned to Ryu and asked, are you looking for party members? Ryu replied, that's right. Jo Young-ho added, you have 4 members now. Just one more, and you'll be set. Right? Ryu said yes. Then Jo Young-ho said, oh, please don't misunderstand. I'm not here to ask you to join our party. We've already completed our formation. Ryu said I wasn't. In fact, Ryu already knew that their party formation was complete. Golden chains on Jo Young-ho and his mercenaries' wrists served as proof. Then Ryu said, it seems you formed a party of 5 since you all have the correct number of members. And he asked straightforwardly, in that case, what was the reason for Jo Young-ho's visit? If you're not here to join our party, why did you seek me out? Jo Young-ho replied, well, out of goodwill, I wanted to greet you and make a suggestion. Ryu inquired, a suggestion? He said, our party and Black Scythe's party. How about forming an alliance together? At that moment, Ryu read his thoughts on what he meant by proposing an alliance. He was saying to himself, I'm not trying to benefit from him. Hope he understands that I'm just offering this with the intention of helping him a little bit. Perhaps grateful for the treatment of Mangi, Jo Young-ho is trying to help Black Scythe in some way. Then he said to Ryu, we're not asking you to join your party. We don't have any intention of seeking items or experience points. If we encounter the boss, we'll give you priority. We simply want to help. Please don't be too guarded. We mean it. Ryu sensed that Jo Young-ho wasn't trying to cling to him, but was genuinely offering assistance out of gratitude for his past aid in Choi Mangi's treatment. After a period of silence, Jo Young-ho seemed like he had been misunderstood and become wary. So Ryu decided to clear up the misunderstanding, and he said, I decline. Jo Young-ho was surprised and said, what? Why, oh, perhaps you're concerned that we might be a hindrance? Don't worry about that. We'll never be a burden. If you ever find us troublesome, you can simply, in front of the boss. Ryu interrupted his words, saying, it's not about that. I just don't like complications. I appreciate the offer, but I'll decline. Then Jo Young-ho said sadly, oh, is that so? That's disappointing. We wanted to help. Ryu said, I'll ask for help when I really need it. Jo Young-ho perked up after receiving a positive response, and he said, will you do that? And he added, so, if we're needed in the future, should you let us know? Ryu said, yes. He asked, is it a promise? Ryu replied, I said yes, didn't I? With a definitive response, Jo Young-ho broke into a satisfied smile. And he said, since we have a promise, we'll take our leave now. We hope to meet again next time. Feel free to ask for help whenever you need it. Goodbye. After they leave, the bodyguard said, Mr. Black Scythe, it's time to make a decision. Who will fill the remaining spot? Ryu said, I've made my decision. And he pointed his finger in one direction. The gazes of his party members followed his finger. Then Ryu said, there, you, come here. The person singled out was taken aback. The person hesitantly approached, and Ryu said, you've been watching me for a while now, haven't you? He said, yes. Ryu asked, why? He hesitated, struggling to answer, and said, that's, well, I want to party with Mr. Black Scythe. Then Ryu asked, what's your level in class? He replied, I'm level 23, a black mage. Ryu said. Well, that probably doesn't matter much. And he added, I'll take this guy for the remaining spot. The bodyguard and the other party members were surprised, and they said to themselves, how could they choose a player who was rejected by others? But the most surprised person in the group was the chosen one, and he said to himself, the Black Scythe wants to include me in his party? Ryu was unexpectedly satisfied. After all, the young man before him was the potential leader of a cult that would worship the Black Scythe like a deity. And Ryu said to himself, in the future, if we form a strong bond, this guy could become a devoted follower. That young man's nickname was Aged Man No Gay, while his real name was Heo Taesok. Then Ryu said, so, let's form the party like this. As they silently memorized party formation, golden rings with engraved characters appeared on their wrists, and the Black Scythe's party had been formed. At that time, Aged Man No Gay never imagined that he would form a party like this. Then Ryu called out, saying, Aged Man No Gay. He inquired, yes? Ryu said, now that we're in a party, introduce yourselves. At the Black Scythe's command, Heo Taesok hesitated for a moment before speaking up, and he said, I'm Aged Man No Gay, level 23, a black mage. My skills are black arrows and black chains. At first, he stumbled over his words, but soon he found his voice. Then Minjuri said, nice to meet you, aged man. I'm a buffer level 21. I'll do my best to support you. Then Seo Arin and the bodyguard introduced themselves. After that, Ryu said, now that we've finished introductions, shall we go hunting? But Minjuri said, wait a moment. I'll cast buffs on everyone first. And she went on to cast buffs on her party members one by one. It was Blessin' Swift. And those who received the buffs couldn't help but be astonished. And they said, my attack and movement speed are 60% faster. Is this real? But Ryu Min remained composed. Then the bodyguard said, this is why the Black Scythe was always with Minjuri, right? Buffer, you're truly amazing. Minjuri smiled and said, why are you embarrassing me? Seeing this, Seo Arin spoke as if unable to contain her jealousy. And she said, I'm a summoner, too. I can cast buffs on my summoned creatures. With here skilled incantations, two fairy-like creatures, aglow with golden dust, materialized. They fluttered about like radiant fireflies. Following this spectacle, a soft, rustling sound filled the air as a humanoid golem, the size of a person, coalesced from the gathering earth. Then Minjuri said in amazement, wow, what are those adorable little things? Seo Arin said, they're fairies. Protective summons that bestows shields. Originally, this one lacked attacking moves, but when I reached level 20, one more fairy was summoned and it could use offensive magic. Minjuri said, wow, that's impressive. And what about that stone-made summon? She said that's a golem I acquired at level 20. While it doesn't provide buffs, it serves to draw monster aggro, so I summoned it ahead of time. Minjuri said excitedly, wow, a tank and a support. You're really impressive, sis. As she received a continuous stream of admiration from Minjuri, Seo Arin's gaze remained fixated on the Black Scythe, and she asked him, what do you think, Black Scythe? Don't I contribute in some way? And she sent a beseeching look, hoping for recognition, but Ryu appeared disinterested, his attention directed elsewhere, and he said, let's get going now. Seo Arin felt very frustrated that the Black Scythe ignored her. As Ryu took the lead, everyone nodded and followed suit. At that time, Aged Man No Gay said to himself, buffer and a summoner, everyone here is quite remarkable. I need to be helpful too, and with a tense expression, he followed closely behind. However, amidst their leisurely pace, he suddenly found himself perplexed, and he said to himself, why is the atmosphere so relaxed? Of course, with a generous 6-hour time limit, they had an abundance of time. They needed to defeat just one of the 101 boss monsters in the field to complete the quest, so it was only natural to proceed with a sense of calm. But isn't it faster to defeat the boss and secure the top spot? Why isn't anyone in a hurry? And doubts crept in. But Aged Man No Gay, unaware of the prophecy, couldn't fathom the reason behind this lackadaisical attitude, and he had yet to realize that there was no benefit in swiftly defeating the boss. But suddenly, from somewhere nearby, a cry rang out. There's the boss! All eyes turned toward the source of the commotion, revealing a colossal monster. It possessed the upper body of a human and the lower body of a horse, a monstrous centaur. One player said, "We must claim the top spot." Then one party charged forward, undeterred, towards the centaur. Brandishing its colossal double-edged axe, the centaur resisted fiercely, causing the players to grapple with its strength. And one player said, "This guy, he's incredibly strong. Spread out and attack." Another said, "Aim for the back. Attack its rear." In response to a shouted command, they instinctively approached from behind. Ryu, who had been observing them, clicked his tongue in disdain and said, "Targeting its rear. Huh? How foolish." And as expected, one player who had ventured behind was met with a powerful kick from the centaur's hind leg. They were sent flying 10 meters before crashing into the ground, rolling an additional 3 meters. Fortunately, the player was still squirming, having avoided death, but the battle seemed impossible to continue. Then one player said angrily, "This bastard will seek revenge!" And the remaining players employed their skills, launching a coordinated assault. Indeed, they succeeded in killing the monster. Then one player said, We won! We're in first place." Another said, "We've finally achieved first place in completing the quest." Another inquired, "It was surprisingly manageable, don't you think?" Amidst the rejoicing faces of the rival team, aged man No Gay couldn't help but feel somewhat disheartened, and he said to himself, "Oh no, the first place was taken from us," and his gaze naturally drifted towards the Black Scythe. After all, he had consistently maintained the top ranking, so he must be the most disappointed. But Ryu's expression remained entirely nonchalant. There was no trace of regret on his face. As time passed, the cheers from the opposing team gradually dwindled, and one player inquired in amazement, What's going on? Why isn't the quest completion appearing?" Another said, "Ah, could it be?" As the players belatedly expressed their disappointment, Ryu smirked, and he said to himself, "I guess they finally realized it. They didn't defeat a boss." And the angel had claimed that there were only 101 bosses, but she never said there were no regular monsters. And the reason Ryu had been so composed while observing became evident. The centaur was merely a standard monster. In fact, the definition of trash mobs can vary from person to person, but in general, they refer to the relatively easy-to-defeat monsters. And for Ryu, the centaur fell into the category of these trash mobs, though for others, it might be considered as elite-level foes. However, that doesn't mean they couldn't handle it, because with a group of 5, they were more than capable. But the issue here is that this creature is labeled as a trash mob, and the real boss, lurking somewhere, was a minotaur with a bull's head, and to take down the minotaur, you'd need at least 20 people, all at level 20. In other words, you'd require 5 parties to have a chance. It's a tough enemy, to say the least. Then Ryu said to himself, "Of course, from my perspective, it's merely a monster with a sturdy physique, but somewhat sluggish movements." And when players assembled their party, they probably thought this mission would be a walk in the park. They might have even thought, "With 5 of us, we can be the first to kill the boss." Then Ryu said to himself, "To stand a chance with a 5-player party, you'd need to be well beyond level 30. But in all honesty, even level 30 seemed like a stretch, maybe if you're at level 40. This is precisely why the angel had emphasized that tackling it solo was a no-go, as the Minotaur wasn't the kind of monster you could take down on your own. And the trap in this round lies right here. They explained it in a way that indicates only a 5-person party could take down the boss. Of course, there hasn't been any explicit mention that a 5-person party is guaranteed to defeat the boss, and they'd need at least 20 people to stand a chance, but the angel acted as if she didn't know. It seemed intentional that crucial information wasn't shared. Then Ryu said to himself, "Well, she's probably just following orders from higher-ups, and they gave us 6 hours not only to defeat the centaur but to gain some levels through hunting. So dealing with the Minotaur could come later." And the ranking method didn't prioritize who struck first. It was all about how quick the party could eliminate the boss. In essence, the order didn't matter, and achieving the quickest kill time meant securing the top spot. That's why Ryu and the rest of the team weren't rushing into action, and the other members of the party knew this too. This is why they didn't rush in, as there were 6 pieces of information that Ryu gave them as the prophet. First, the main mission of round 6 is to form a party of 5 players and defeat the boss. Second, centaurs are just mobs, and minotaurs are the real bosses. Third, the boss requires 4 parties of 5 people to defeat, so cooperation between parties is necessary. Fourth, the ranking measurement method is not based on the order in which party killed the boss first. The order will be determined by which party achieved the lesser time kill. Fifth, the moment a party kills the boss, they will be immediately sealed by a pillar of light. In short, it is rather disadvantageous to defeat the boss quickly because you will spend the remaining time meaninglessly sitting there. Sixth, it is best to defeat the centaurs within the time limit, level up, and then challenge the boss. This was the key strategy for round 6. Only Aged Man No Gay did not hear the prophecy, doesn't know this. Then Ryu, who was silently observing the field, finally spoke to the party members and said, "Let me lay out my plan for the moment." And he added, "We're going to put off tackling the boss for now, and instead, we'll focus on taking down these centaur-like creatures to level up. We'll keep at it for at least 5 hours." Aged Man No Gay inquired. "Why? What's the reasoning behind this?" Ryu said. As you can see, players at level 20 were struggling against these centaurs. If such trash mobs are so troublesome, then the boss likely requires multiple teams to stand a chance against it. Rushing into the boss fight without knowing its true strength seems ill-advised. Plus, there might be other traps awaiting us. He said, "Ah, I see now." And Ryu added, "Also, I'm thinking, what if, for instance, we defeat the boss early, like we did in the first round, and end up trapped in the Pillar of Light? We'd waste precious time without any gain. So it seems wiser to hunt the mobs and assess the situation." Aged Man No Gay said, I understand. "So, your plan is to prioritize leveling up first and leave the boss for later?" Ryu said, "Exactly." Then he asked, "But what if we miss out on the top spot?" Ryu replied, "It doesn't matter. Even if we miss out on the first place reward, we'll have earned experience and gold from 6 hours of hunting. Perhaps the ranking method doesn't give priority to who strikes first." At that moment, the bodyguard found himself speechless, and he said to himself, "Incredible. How did he figure it out like this? It's exactly like the prophecy, and it's like finding your way out of a maze without making a single wrong turn." Then he said to Ryu, "Got it. Shall we all head out to hunt these centaur-like creatures together? Oh, but before that, we should discuss our positions and basic strategies." Ryu said, "No need for that. I'll handle the monsters on my own." Everyone, including the bodyguard, was astonished, and they inquired, "What? You alone, Black Scythe?" They said to themselves, taking on a monster that a 5-member party struggled with, alone? Of course, given Black Scythe's level, it was entirely possible, but what would the rest of the group do if he went solo? Ryu read their thoughts and said, "The rest of you, just stick with me, collect experience points, and gold. You could think of it as a free ride. In other words, he'll carry them along." And Ryu added, "However, I'll take all the items that come through contributions. In return, you can level up and earn gold quickly without any risk." How does that sound? In fact, it was certainly an appealing offer. And why refuse to give up a few items when you could safely gain experience points and gold? So they said, "Very well, we're fine with it." Ryu nodded in agreement and said, "You made a wise choice. You probably won't be disappointed." As Ryu, going solo was more convenient than fighting with everyone, and trying to help from the sidelines would only be a hindrance. Then he said to himself, "It's just a centaur, so it's nothing more than a trash mob to me." And he brandished his death scythe and said, "Shall we get going?" As Ryu shot off like a bullet, the group was taken aback, and they said, "We should follow him quickly," and they chased after Ryu. Despite the swift spell being active, the distance didn't seem to close down, and the bodyguard said, "How can he be this fast? Just how high is his agility?" Even Aged Man No Gay, who prided himself on his speed, felt like a mere cat compared to Black Scythe. At the moment, they were able to catch up with Ryu. Ryu came face to face with a centaur for the first time, and before the monster finished screaming, Ryu waved his scythe and the monster's head fell with a swift strike. The time it took to defeat the centaur was 0.3 seconds. The group was left dumbfounded as it hadn't even taken a second, and they said, "What just happened? Just one hit?" None of them had expected the centaur to be defeated in a single blow. Using his tracking skill, took a moment to catch his breath, and a system message appeared. Target Centaur located. Then Ryu continued to hunt. He was like a killing machine in human form. Then he said to himself, had it been around 30 minutes since I began my hunt? After that, Ryu looked at the system messages. Centaur has been defeated. Experience points, XU3. Title effect increases experience points by 1.5 times. Experience 0.89%. Gold plus 60. Current kill count 172-100. Rune of Slaughter effect increases all stats by 100%. Then Ryu said to himself, 172 kills in 30 minutes. Not too shabby. And there were a total of 2,000 centaurs in the field. At this rate, I might be able to devour them all within 6 hours. But considering other players will be hunting too, let's leave some for them. Then Ryu's gaze shifted downward to the system message. Stacks accumulated with the Bead of Eternity, 71-100. Current durability of the Bead of Eternity, 828-1000. Stat points gained from the Bead of Eternity, 11. And Ryu said to himself, all I need to do is keep hunting centaurs until the Bead of Eternity's durability reaches 1, just like last time. And I should ask Russell to repair the durability when I return. While pondering that, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching. Turning around, he saw his party members rushing towards him. Seeing the party members who were too exhausted even to chase, Ryu couldn't help but smile. And he said, if you're tired, take a short break. They said happily, really? Thank you. After that, the party members sat down on the spot for a break. CO Aaron and Aged Man No Gay, with the lowest strength stats, lay down completely on their backs. And Aged Man No Gay said, it's tiring just to chase after him. Seriously. I thought a 100-meter radius would be spacious enough, but it's not. The bodyguard said, yeah, you're right. They said that, but it couldn't have been a happier concern. They had already leveled up in just 30 minutes. Then Minjuri said, Black Sai, you're truly amazing. Your hunting speed is unbelievably fast. Ryu asked, do you not like it? In response to Ryu's teasing question, Minjuri waved her hand dismissively and said, oh no, not at all. Even just chasing after you raises our levels. At that moment, CO Arin joined the conversation and she asked, is this what they call a free ride? You're probably working harder than us, Black Scythe. But Ryu Min simply responded with a nonchalant remark. And he said, it seems like you guys are working even harder. They all laughed. As they laughed and caught their breath, a group approached Ryu, and one said, it's Black Scythe. Wow, it really is him. There were 4 people in the group, and a total of 20 onlookers. And when the group came closer, the party members' laughter subsided, and they looked at the approaching group with wary eyes. However, there was no need to worry. These guys were crazy, but they wouldn't attack a party with Black Scythe in it. Then one said to Ryu, hello, Black Scythe. It's quite lucky to meet you here. Ryu said coldly. Okay, and what do you want? He said, well, we're recruiting a team to hunt the boss. How about joining our group? Ryu asserted firmly. I declined. The response caught the other party off guard, and his expression shifted from anticipation to puzzlement. And he said, Black Scythe, you might not be aware, but the boss isn't a pushover. Do you see that thing over there? The muscular minotaur? Everyone's attention shifted to a minotaur that exuded an aura of strength, even from a distance. Then the player said, that creature is the boss we must confront, and I assure you he's no walk in the park. Ryu asked, how can you be so sure? Have you faced him before? The player replied, yes, not personally, but we witnessed another party attempt a solo challenge and end up in utter defeat. It was a sobering sight that made us realize the importance of cooperation among parties. Ryu responded curtly, take care of it yourselves. We're not interested. The player said, still, wouldn't it be better if we helped each other out? We'll even allow you to deliver the finishing blow first, so consider it. Before he could finish, he was interrupted, as Ryu retorted sharply, this is the 3rd time. Don't make me repeat myself. Subdued by Ryu's aura, they reluctantly retreated and said, all right, my apologies. As they reached the gathering of parties, discussions, and deliberations commenced. And the player said, it seems we won't be able to recruit Black Scythe. Another asked, did you try to recruit them? He replied, we did, but they declined and said we can defeat it on our own. One player said, why's that? Black Scythe should be part of this or we won't be able to take it down. Another player sighed and said, I'm not sure. Maybe they're intimidated by the boss or perhaps, and he added, well, It looks like we'll have to face the challenge alone. Since Black Scythe declined, we had planned to tackle it independently anyway. With nods of agreement, the group finally prepared to hunt the Minotaur, and with each heavy step, the massive creature, standing at a towering 6 meters tall, emitted a resounding thud that reverberated through the air. From a distance, the creature didn't appear as intimidating, but up close, its immense size was even more apparent. Then one player asked in fear, "Do you think we can defeat it?" Another replied, "Well, our group consists of about 20 members." Despite their words, uncertainty still clouded their expressions. But suddenly, the Minotaur sensed something and turned its head. The players, who had been quietly advancing, froze in their tracks, and excitement surged through the Minotaur as it spotted the humans, and it charged forward. Then 20 players rushed in to engage, fighting for their lives against the towering beast. At that time, Ryu observed the situation calmly, contemplating how long will it take them to bring it down. Ryu had no doubt about the outcome, as the Minotaur wasn't as formidable as it appeared. Its attacks lacked finesse, and it was far from swift. Its somewhat sluggish movements made it predictable and easy to evade. Then Ryu said to himself, "If all 20 of them attacked, that creature won't stand a chance." However, the Minotaur's strength lay in its extraordinary endurance, surpassing even that of a jewel. From its perspective, humans were nothing more than buzzing flies, and 20 flies buzzing around won't pose much of a threat. At least, that's what it believed. As the battle raged on for over 3 minutes with no end in sight, Ryu continued to watch, as the demise of the boss would provide them with the motivation to focus on the hunt. Finally, after more than 7 minutes had passed, the Minotaur let out a pitiful cry and collapsed to the ground, and the party members rejoiced and said, "We got it! We finally killed it!" But 3 out of 20 players didn't make it and died. Then one player asked, "Who landed the final blow?" "It doesn't seem like our team did." One player said happily, "It was our team. We're the ones who brought it down." Amidst the victorious cheers, a radiant pillar of light descended from the sky, and one of the 4 teams that had been battling the Minotaur found themselves enveloped by a translucent pillar. Then one player said, "It looks like our team has survived." I checked the quest progress window, and it proudly displays success. Then one player asked, "But do we really have to stay here until the time runs out? Is it true that we need to be trapped here for over 5 hours?" Another replied, "It seems so, and it's nice to rest early, but it feels like we're missing out on something." Although defeating the boss first was a triumph, the idea of being stuck within the pillar, having to while away the remaining time, felt somewhat uneasy. Then one of the players who hadn't managed to defeat the boss said, "Well then, let's go and find other parties. We need some reinforcements." At that moment, the remaining parties briefly cast glances at Black Scythe, but soon shook their heads and departed, as they knew that talking wouldn't change their minds about cooperation. Then Ryu said to his party, "It's fortunate. If we had defeated the boss too early, we would have squandered the remaining time." The bodyguard said, "Yes," just as Black Scythe predicted. Hunting slowly and defeating it as late as possible was the right approach. And without altering his expression, Ryu addressed his companions. "We've rested enough. Now let's move on. Follow me." While Ryu hunted the centaur, other teams joined forces and concentrated on the boss hunt. And one player asked after defeating the boss, "Are we the 50th party?" Another replied, "I don't know, the rankings aren't displayed, but who cares? We've defeated the boss, so we've survived, right?" Another player said, "Let's just lie down and rest for the remaining time." In fact, even though they were trapped, they were safe from monsters, and the Minotaur didn't seem to acknowledge their presence. They were like invisible entities. But suddenly one of them shouted, "Hey, look at that! Look!" At that moment, a player holding a scythe appeared, and with each pass of the scythe, the centaur heads rolled to the ground. Then one player said, "Isn't that Black Scythe? He defeated it in one shot." Another said that's what you'd expect from a level 40 player. While it was impressive that Black Scythe had taken down the centaur with a single blow, the victorious players didn't envy them. They were already winners, having defeated the boss and now resting. But what puzzled them was why Black Scythe was only targeting the centaur and not the boss. Then one asked, "Why are they not going for the boss and resting early? Isn't it better to defeat the boss quickly and take a break?" Another replied, "No, they're below the top 50 now. They've missed the top ranks, so they're probably focused on leveling up." The player said, "I see. That makes sense, but it's a shame. I thought he might aim for first place again." Another added, Even though they're Black Scythe, they can't stay at the top forever. While the group that had already defeated the boss believed they were superior to Black Scythe, they were unaware of one thing. Their record of 11 minutes and 30 seconds in the boss hunt was the longest and ranked last. As Ryu continued to run without stopping to focus solely on hunting the mobs, he suddenly halted as he paused in response to a message that had popped up. "Can't locate target Centaur anymore," Ryu muttered. Finally, they're all gone, and he checked the kill count and the remaining time. Current kill count, 1,920 out of 100. Time remaining until the end of the round, 20 minutes and 43 seconds. Then he said to himself, about 1,920 kills in roughly 5 hours and 40 minutes. It was incredibly fast compared to what he had expected. At that moment, a panting voice came from behind. "Black Scythe, is it finally rest time?" Rao said, "Yes, we're done with hunting." Only now did the group check the time limit, and they exclaimed, feeling a sense of urgency creeping in, and said, "Only 20 minutes left?" It had been a mere 3 hours since their last check, but time had swiftly slipped away, leaving them in a race against the clock. Because in the amid of the relentless pursuit and constant action, there had been no chance to pause and take stock. But suddenly the bodyguard urged, his tone laced with surprise, "Huh? Everyone, check your levels." The party members hurriedly opened their status windows, their faces reflecting a mix of confusion and astonishment. And they said our levels. "They've shot up significantly," and SEO Aaron said it was 20 initially, but now it's 34. The bodyguard said, "I'm in the same boat, from 20 to 34. Minjuri said, "Mine went from 21 to 35. Aged Man No Gay said, "I was 23, and now I'm 36. As Aged Man No Gay's response came in, Ryu muttered to himself, recognizing that everyone had gained 13 to 14 levels. Well, it's no wonder, considering the first digit changed from 2 to 3. And in fact, Ryu's own level had made a significant leap, shifting from 40 to an unexpected 54. This impressive feat was thanks to the 3x experience round buff, and the title he earned that multiplied experience by 1.5x. With over 1,100 kills under his belt, he had acquired a trove of items, including 19 magic stones, 9 pieces of normal equipment, miscellaneous items, and the ingredients needed for a god-grade combination. Then Ryu scrutinized the item information once more. Glimmering tail. Category: inventory. Description: as the name suggests, it's a tail that glimmers. Faint magical energy can be felt, and Ryu said to himself, this is more important than anything else. Perhaps because he had secured the key item, Ryu couldn't help but let a satisfied grin creep onto his face, and he said to himself, all the hard work had certainly paid off. Now I just need to find 2 more items. At that moment, Minjuri let out a collective gasp and said, everyone, check this out. We've amassed a huge amount of gold. CO Aaron said, I have the same. It's 115 gold. Since they were in a party, the gold had been evenly distributed among them. Of course, there might be some differences based on their luck stat. And in contrast to his teammates, Ryu had a staggering 150,000 gold in his possession, thanks to a luck stat exceeding 350, which increased his chances of acquiring extra gold. Then Minjuri smiled and said, what should we do with all of this? Having this amount of money doesn't feel right, right? His party members were unsure how to spend their newfound wealth, so Ryu offered some guidance, and he said, if you don't have a specific use for the money, buy utility skills from the store, invest in perception, enhanced night vision, and basic resistances, save the rest of the gold, and if you spot something you need in the daily items section, make the purchase. Minjuri said, I will follow your advice, Mr. Black Scythe, and the party members nodded, readily accepting Ryu's counsel. Given his high insight and extensive experience, it made perfect sense to heed his words. While his teammates indulged in unexpected shopping, Ryu opened the quest progress window. Area CESKS07. Participants, 1,010. Achievers, 445 out of 505. Observing the number of achievers, it was evident that 50 remained, and that means there are only 10 Minotaurs left. Then Ryu promptly activated the Track Minotaur skill to pinpoint their location, and the system message appeared. Location of target Minotaur has been determined. Currently, 198 meters away. Seeing that the Minotaurs were relatively close, Ryu took the lead and said to his party, follow me. We need to defeat the final boss. And after a few brisk strides, They finally laid eyes on the Minotaur. However, they weren't alone. 3 other teams were already waiting nearby. Then one player said, "Oh, it's Black Scythe? He's finally moving." Another said to Ryu, "Black Scythe, please party with us. Let's hunt together." Without hesitation, Ryu shook his head and nonchalantly said, "No, I'll take down the boss on my own." The player said to Ryu, capturing the boss alone, "What kind of nonsense is this? Forgetting about your own capabilities, you're saying you're going to capture the boss by yourself, not even your own team." And that player said to himself, "No matter how high the level of the Black Scythe is, the opponent is the boss, and it's a boss that takes at least 20 people to barely defeat. And if the Black Scythe really manages to capture the boss, it's the same as saying his skills are on par with 20 players. From their perspective, who take pride in their skills, this was unacceptable." Then the player laughed and said to Ryu, "I see now that you're quite boastful, Black Scythe." Ryu's gaze turned cold and said, "You're underestimating me too much. Do you guys think I can't capture it?" The player said, "Well, but we have more people, right?" Ryu smiled and said, "Even if you are many, flies are still flies." The player hesitated and said, "What? That's a bit..." Ignoring player's comment, Ryu walked forward, and his team members were also surprised by the declaration that he would capture the boss alone. And the bodyguard said, "Black Scythe?" But Ryu said, "Wait, I'll finish it soon." Carrying the death scythe, people made way for him like the Red Sea, and the atmosphere was unusual. Then Ryu said to everyone, "Stay further away. Anyone who interferes will die." And he also said to himself, "It would be good to hide the ultimate skill if possible. But maybe this is a chance to truly showcase my strength." In fact, most people don't know how strong the Black Scythe really was. They just assume that since his level is higher, he's just a little bit stronger and they'll catch up eventually. And Ryu said to himself, "They felt it when they saw me fight before, but they don't truly understand yet. But what if they saw me quickly defeat the Minotaur that they needed 20 people to have a chance against? No fly would dare to underestimate the Black Scythe. So let's finish it as quickly as possible." As Ryu stepped forward, most people wore expressions of disbelief, and they said, "Is he really going to do it alone?" It was getting boring, but this should be interesting. At that time, Ryu, who had stopped a certain distance ahead, faced the Minotaur. Then the giant bull monster sensed his presence and turned to look, and it snorted with a menacing glint in its eyes. But Ryu's momentum did not waver. Ryu simply held his scythe with both hands and extended it behind him. Seeing that, one player inquired, "What's he doing? Is he going to use a skill in that posture?" Despite the murmurs around him, Ryu continued to gaze at the Minotaur without faltering. And Ryu said to himself, "The system measures the record when the attack reaches a certain range. In other words, right now, it's just considered a preparatory movement, and time measurement isn't taking place. And when he enters my range, I'll aim for his throat." Then Ryu Min's gaze narrowed as he gauged the distance from the Minotaur, and he said to himself, "Be patient." Then the Minotaur dared to charge at Ryu. At that time, moonlight energy gathered around Ryu's scythe, and darkness covered the place. It was the result of using Night of Death skill. Then he used Moonlight Slaughter skill. At that moment, Ryu's scythe traced a half moon, and the sound of something falling could be heard. The situation became clear as soon as the curtain was lifted, and one player shouted, "Look at that! Isn't that the Minotaur's head?" That thick neck that would be difficult to cut even with 20 swords was cleanly severed in one stroke. The players wore expressions of disbelief, their gazes alternating between Ryu and the fallen boss. And they said, "He defeated it in a single strike. This can't be real. It doesn't add up." What are his stats now? Currently, Ryu's stats stand at 403 in strength and 627 in intelligence. These impressive figures resulted from a combination of Minjuri's buffs, the Rune of Slaughter, and the Rune of Balance. And with stats like these, taking down a boss in a single hit is entirely feasible. Furthermore, he had activated Death's Knight during this crucial moment, amplifying the damage from Moonlight Slaughter by 1.5 times. Then Ryu said to himself, "The High Orc was one-shotted, and this Minotaur is weaker than him." And despite being the boss for round 6, the Minotaur was weaker than even the High Orc. Then a message from the system appeared. "You have defeated the Minotaur." Experience points are boosted by 3 times. Experience points increase by 1.5 times due to the title effect. Experience points plus 111.68%. Gold Y1200, acquired bull leather, acquired blueprint Minotaur armor. Since they were in a party, similar messages would have appeared for the teammates. The experience points and gold might not seem substantial, but that was due to their large group. Then Ryu smiled and said to himself, "It's true that I didn't get a lot of gold, but all the items are mine." Ryu chuckled as he glanced at his item list. Among the various items dropped by the Minotaur, the best one had emerged. Bull leather, category, possession, description. A high-quality cowhide suitable for crafting armor due to its toughness. It is a material used for creating the Minotaur's armor, and the blueprint for the armor had also appeared. Design, Minotaur armor. Category, consumable. Description, an item with 6 combinations that can be used to create the unique item, Minotaur armor. It's best to prepare to jot down the combinations before using it. Then, Ryu said to himself, most likely the bull leather would be listed among the materials in the blueprint, and it reveals the item's combinations when used. But because it disappears after one use, it was best to either memorize it or jot it down somewhere. And I don't need it, though. I have everything in my head. In fact, Ryu had no intention of crafting the Minotaur's armor, as it was exclusively designed for tanks, and he already had a set of armor in mind, so this item wasn't necessary. However, he decided to keep it for the time being, as unique design blueprints could fetch a high price. Satisfied, Ryu returned to his party members, who were all wide-eyed in astonishment. Their expressions seemed to say that they hadn't expected it to be a one-hit kill. But among them, aged man, no gaze expression was particularly peculiar. Seeing that, Ryu said to himself, "What's with that guy? What's with that look?" He was gazing at Ryu Min with a dreamy expression, resembling someone smitten with love. It seemed like he had lost his mind. Then Ryu said to himself, "He's going to become a follower, so it's not like I don't understand, but maybe I should keep my distance." And Ryu Min didn't want any misunderstandings. Although his name says he is a straight person, but those looks make anyone say, "Damn, what the fuck is he?" In the midst of it all, the bodyguard was secretly amazed, and he said, "What just happened? It was so fast that I couldn't even see it properly." It seemed like a flash of lightning in the darkness, and the next moment, the Minotaur's head had fallen, and he continued saying to himself, was it a skill, or maybe a regular attack? And to think he'd take down the boss in one shot, it still seemed absurd. Afterward, pillars of light descended and enveloped them, and with the boss defeated, they had passed the round, although their ranking remained uncertain. Then Ryu gazed at the remaining bosses and said, "Now, only 9 tickets left. There's not much time left, so they need to hurry." Realizing this, the parties scattered across the area and began to engage the Minotaurs, and the game soon came to an end. Then the angel appeared, and with an evil smile she said, "For the teams that failed to defeat the bosses, there's no need to worry. You will immediately be eliminated." These players started screaming and cringing. "No, please! Wait, Angel, just a moment." After that, Priscilla said, "Shall we take a look at the rankings?" Round 6. Results. Overall, first place, Black Scythe and 4 others, 0001. Second place, Heavenly Demon and 4 others, 00321. Third place, Dumb Fools and 4 others, 0009. Zone CS 07. First place, Black Scythe and 4 others, 0001. Second place, Kim Sahanmu and 4 others, 00531. Third place, Rice Eater and 4 others, 00558, and Priscilla added, "By the way, the nicknames on the results screen have been credited to the most contributing humans." Players who checked the rankings were taken aback, and one player said, "What's this? Why isn't our team in first place? We definitely defeated it first, didn't we?" Also, Black Scythe's team is in first place? The team that took so long? Priscilla, overhearing their complaints, couldn't help but smirk, and she said, "Who said that? Who said the ranks would be based on the order of defeat? As you can see, the ranking is determined by the time it takes to kill the boss." Another said, "Time? Ah, so that's why our team is in last place." Then Priscilla said, "The longest time taken was 11 minutes and 30 seconds. I can't imagine how someone could spend over 11 minutes on a single cow. These inferior humans, I swear." And Priscilla, who had been mocking them, checked the records once more and said, "On the other hand, the shortest time was 1 minute. It belongs to Black Scythe's team and, well, it's a decent performance." One player said, "Angel? The time is wrong." Priscilla inquired, "What are you talking about?" The player said, "The time, I mean." She said, "Is it not 1 minute?" With feeling something was amiss, Priscilla blinked and looked again. She was surprised and said, "It's not 1 minute? It's 1 second? But she realized her mistake too late and wore a bewildered expression, and she murmured under her breath, seemingly unaware that humans were watching her in astonishment. She was saying to herself, 1 second? Just 1 second? The angel, who had only just realized her mistake, broke into a cold sweat, and she tried to remedy the situation, saying, it seems that a record of 1 second is possible. Anyway, how weak must the boss be? But her earlier boast about the boss's strength now seemed completely contradictory. Then she added, well, first, let's reward the top 3 ranks. The rewards will be given only to the person with the highest contribution, so please keep that in mind. At that moment, a welcome message appeared in front of Ryu. Congratulations, you've achieved first place in this zone. Congratulations, you've achieved first place overall. Black Scythe is ranked first in the overall and zone rankings. As the first place reward for this zone, you will receive a high epic helmet selection voucher. As the first place reward for the overall ranking, you will receive a special reward selection box. Then Ryu smiled faintly and said, a high epic helmet, and another system window appeared. You can choose one of the following epic helmets. Please touch the desired reward. 1. Angel's Ring. 2. Minotaur's Bullhide Helm. 3. Hermes' feathered helm. Ryu said to himself, among these, the feathered helm suits me best. It has some pretty appealing stats. And when he selected option 3, the item information appeared. Hermes' feathered helm. Category helmet. Grade, epic. Description, a helmet modeled after Hermes' feathered cap. It's not a genuine article, but it allows you to use invisibility when needed. Defense, 180. Effects, agility, plus 10, invisibility available, durability, 1,500, usage restriction, expert rank or higher. The best thing in Hermes' feathered helm is the unique option, invisibility. Invisibility, as the name suggests, grants its user the extraordinary ability to become invisible. It's a skill particularly coveted by assassins, often considered the pinnacle of their craft. And when assassins reach level 20, they gain the skill of invisibility. However, what makes this item truly remarkable is that it can be wielded by anyone, not just assassins, and its effectiveness remains consistent for all classes. But before you start thinking that invisibility is the ultimate game changer, there's a catch. This skill triggers the perception skill, a common ability that allows individuals to detect concealed presences. In essence, while you can turn your body invisible, you can't muffle the sound you make. Additionally, invisibility's effectiveness is limited by its cooldown period, making it less advantageous in combat situations. And if you're wondering why does Ryu hold invisibility in such high regard, well, that's where the Rune of Concealment comes into play. This special rune, known as the Rune of Concealment, can be acquired in round 9. It not only shields the user from perception skill, but also eliminates invisibility's cooldown, rendering it an incredibly potent combination. So Ryu's plan is clear. Obtain the Rune of Concealment and pair it with an item possessing the invisibility ability for a nearly unbeatable and broken strategy. For now, Ryu secured one of the 2 components of his plan. All that's left is to acquire the Rune of Concealment, and with Hermes' feathered helm now in his possession, a message appears. Wearing Hermes' feathered helm, you can use the invisibility skill as an option. Temporary skill, invisibility. Effect, you can completely hide yourself from your opponent. However, only the appearance is hidden, and the effect does not apply to the sound. This means that the skill allows complete invisibility for 30 minutes, but any action, be it an attack or being attacked, dispels the effect. You can deactivate it at will, but it comes with a 30-minute cooldown, and this newfound skill, invisibility, is now a part of Ryu's skill list. But as soon as he removes Hermes' feathered helm, the skill vanishes. Then Ryu faced a choice from a special reward selection box. You can choose one of the following special rewards. Please touch the desired reward. 1. Material item selection ticket, 14,000 gold. 3. Information about round 7. In Ryu's mind, the choice is clear. Option 3 is discarded. because Ryu's biggest weapon is the experience and information from his 99th regressions. And option 1, the material item selection ticket, is chosen. As soon as the choice is made, the material item selection ticket appears in Ryu's inventory. Without hesitation, he makes his selection. Then a message system appeared. Please choose one of the following materials. 1. Broken ironwood branch. 2. Bubbling elixir. 3. Tough magic shell. 10. Angelic golden powder. Then Ryu said to himself, if you don't know the uses of each item, it will be meaningless what you choose. But for me, the decision is crystal clear to someone with his knowledge, and he chose the last option. Among the 10 choices, this was the lone god-tier material, and with obtaining the item, information unveiled itself. Angelic golden powder. Category, inventory. Description, fine powder scattered from an angel's hair. It's not dandruff. Then Ryu said to himself, now, with just one more material, I can craft a god-tier item. However, that remaining material wouldn't surface until after round 8, so there was no need for immediate excitement. After that, the end window appeared for everyone. Round 6 ends, entire area. Survivors, 8,060,295, area CES007. Survivors, 505. Souls will return to their original bodies shortly. Round 7 will commence at midnight on July 1st, 2022. See you in the next round. Congratulations on your survival. Once back in the real world, the bodyguard quickly ran to Heavenly Demon's hotel room. Then he pushed the door. Seeing this situation, Heavenly Demon said, Director Ann, what's the matter that you've come rushing right after your return? The bodyguard, his face radiating excitement, blurted out, saying, Chairman, my level has shot up dramatically. Heavenly Demon said, Really? So did you level up by hunting alongside Black Scythe? Is it like he said, a 6-hour-long hunting spree? In fact, having received the same prophecy, Heavenly Demon was well aware of the situation. Then he asked, so how many levels is it, to the point that you came running so excited? The bodyguard replied, I went up from level 20 to level 34. That's a whopping 14 levels up. Heavenly Demon was shocked and inquired, 34? Are you sure? The bodyguard said, Yes, it really went up a lot, didn't it? Heavenly Demon said, it's worth getting excited about. But how did you gain 14 levels in 6 hours? He said Black Scythe did all the hunting by himself. Our party members had a tough time keeping up. Then Heavenly Demon added, but as a compensation, he took all the items, right? He said yes, but I don't regret sharing the items at all. I never imagined I'd level up this quickly. Heavenly Demon said I find myself in the same situation. I never thought Director An would surpass my levy hearing that. The bodyguard asked Chairman, what level are you? He replied, 29. At that moment, the bodyguard decided not to say anything more. No matter what he said, it would make the chairman uncomfortable. Then Heavenly Demon asked, is CO Arian around the same level as well? He nodded discreetly while gauging Heavenly Demon's reaction. Heavenly Demon said to himself with a wry smile, I've ended up with a lower level than CO Aaron. I need to step up my game. Then he asked, why don't you tell me, Director Ann? Did Black Scythe really hunt down the bosses so quickly? The bodyguard replied, yes, he took out the centaur in one hit. Heavenly Demon said, so, that's why it was much quicker. Even though our team consists of 5 members, it wasn't as quick as that. And he inquired, is it true that it was in just 1 second? The bodyguard said, indeed. He used a skill I'd never seen before, and the Minotaur's neck was sliced in an instant. It was the first time I'd seen such a skill. Heavenly Demon, who took pride in his skills as ranking 2nd or 3rd, couldn't hide his astonishment, and he said, killing the Minotaur with 1 skill in 1 second? Amazing. And he added, it should be a skill learned at level 40, since Director Ann is seeing it for the first time. Then he felt bitter and said to himself, is the gap between us and the first ranker this big? Can I become that strong when I reach level 40? In fact, the Dark Knight's skills were powerful, and he was satisfied with them. But he said to himself, sadly, it's not on the same level as Black Scythe's. And he thought, even if he reached level 40, he wasn't sure if he could display the same presence. Facing the unexpected situation of having subordinates with higher levels than himself, his pride couldn't allow such humiliation. Instead, a newfound determination began to kindle within him, and he said to himself, instead of worrying about that, I should focus on leveling up first, and I need to up my game. Then he said to the bodyguard who chose silence, after unintentionally pricking the chairman's ego, I should really thank Black Scythe. I've been slacking off lately, and he's managed to reignite my motivation. And not to forget, he helped level up Director On and CO Aaron's levels. We should definitely show our appreciation when we meet him later, don't you think? The bodyguard said. Should I try to find a way to personally show my gratitude too? Heavenly Demon said no need for that. After all, you sacrificed items in exchange for experience points. My subordinates benefited from him. Showing gratitude is my responsibility as the chairman. And he added, we should also inquire with the Prophet about when we can meet Black Scythe again. The bodyguard asked, do you think the Prophet survived? Heavenly Demon smiled and said, instead of pondering that, it's faster to make a confirmation call. Besides, it falls under Director On's jurisdiction. The bodyguard said, I was being thoughtless. My apologies. I'll check right away. Then Heavenly Demon said, no need to apologize. Just inform me once you have the information. Oh, and by the way, did you manage to learn those skills I mentioned earlier? He responded, yes, I've indeed acquired the tracking and erasing traces skills as you advised. Heavenly Demon smiled and said, then, later on, when we put those skills to use, join us for a little cleanup. We're planning to take care of some nuisances, and it's been a while. The bodyguard inquired, you intend to work at this hour? It's almost dawn. He said, it's fine. We won't be causing any harm outside. On the other hand, CO Aaron held a deep sense of gratitude toward Black Scythe. She may have given up some items, but in return, she had acquired a substantial amount of experience points and gold. And she said, it always feels like I owe something to Black Scythe. Whether it was the leveling up this time or his previous act of saving her life, she felt she hadn't adequately repaid him. Then she said, I want to be of more help to Black Scythe, but it's not that simple. At best, I could offer him low-grade Marquise stones or express my gratitude, but it didn't feel like enough. And no matter how much I think about it, I don't know how I can be of assistance. He doesn't seem to need it either. But after a moment, she remembered Min Jury, and she said to herself, well, that wasn't entirely true. Even Black Scythe needed assistance from someone else. Wasn't there a woman in a contract with him who provided continuous buffs? And she added Min Jury, right? The woman in a contract with Black Scythe, and comparing avatars might be fruitless, but she had a pretty face and a lively personality. Plus, she bestows some impressive buffs, and it made sense that Black Scythe kept her by his side. Just having her around provided significant help. Then she said frustratedly, I wish I could be that kind of assistance. In fact, however, she had fairy buffs, but they only offered a thin, protective shield at best. And as a summoner, she had her limitations when it came to providing assistance. Then she said, I need to think about this. After that, CO Aaron stepped out of her apartment and entered the elevator. Her plan was to make a quick stop at the convenience store for some essentials, but suddenly, the descending elevator came to an unexpected halt on the lower floor, and someone said, oh, actress Seo Aren? It was none other than Ryu, her neighbor, and a business associate of Heavenly Demon, and interestingly, a prophet. Then Seo Aren greeted him with a polite nod, and she said, thanks to the information provided by the prophet, we managed to smoothly navigate through round 6. I'm grateful. Thank you. Ryu responded casually, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. Then fell silent. Seo Aren observed him thoughtfully and said to herself, he's quite an intriguing person. At just 20 years old, he carries himself with confidence even in the presence of Chairman Heavenly Demon and his business insight. Then she asked herself, could I have displayed such confidence if I were a prophet? In fact, even if she possessed the same ability, she doubted she could exude such self-assuredness. Then she asked Ryu, where are you headed, prophet? Ryu replied, I'm planning to make a quick stop at the convenience store, she said. The convenience store? I was heading there too. At that moment, an idea popped into Seo Aren's mind, and she said to herself, while I couldn't assist Black Scythe directly, I could lend a helping hand to the prophet. Then she said to Ryu, since I'm going the same way, let me run an errand for you. We're neighbors. I can drop off your items on my way back up. Ryu said, no need for that, she said. Still, I received something from the prophet and I want to repay the favor in some way. After a brief pause, Ryu raised his head and said, you can't just send a celebrity to run errands, she said insistently. It's something I'm willing to do. But Ryu insisted on refusing, saying, if word gets out that I had a celebrity running errands for me, your fans will give me a hard time. Hearing that, Seo Aren's head dropped. Even though her face wasn't visible, her disappointment was palpable. But suddenly Ryu said, "If you truly want to help, how about giving me an autograph?" She was surprised and inquired, "An autograph? Seriously?" Ryu said, "My younger brother is a fan of yours." She said, "Oh, you want to give it to your younger brother? I'll gladly do that for you." And she realized he was trying to do something nice for his brother, but somehow it made her a bit sad. As Seo Aaron was immensely popular among men in their 20s, but this particular individual seemed uninterested. On the other hand, aged man no gay was saying to himself, being accepted by the Black Scythe as a party member, who would have thought? And the notion of teaming up with the legendary Black Scythe was beyond his wildest dreams. And he pondered ways to return the favor, feeling useless and despondent. And he said, if only I had skills to assist the Black Scythe. Even his job as a dark mage was unuseful. And a wolf pup cannot aid a full-grown wolf. It only gets in the way. Then he asked himself, what can I offer in this world? Then an epiphany struck him, and he said, what does a god need? Aged man no gay's lips curved into a grin, and he said, the god only needs devout followers. Meanwhile, Ryu browsed flights on his phone, and he said, I need to visit Russell to recover the durability. And he added with a smile, but the prophecy he shared with him last time might change his reception. But suddenly, Ryu's phone buzzed with an international call, and the caller said, it's me, Russell Daniel. Is this Mr. Ryu? Ryu answered, yes, I'm Ryu. Then Russell sounded excited and said, Mr. Prophet, thank you. You saved my life. Ryu inquired, what happened? Russell said, I'll explain when I arrive. Hearing that, Ryu was surprised and asked, you're coming to Korea? He replied, yes, I've booked my flight. Is this inconvenient, Mr. Ryu? Ryu said, no, I was hoping to meet you. I'll wait at Incheon Airport. Next day, Ryu Min greeted Russell at the airport. Russell approached with a broad smile and said, Mr. Ryu! Ryu said, welcome to Korea, Russell. After a brief handshake, they headed to the parking lot, and Ryu said, let's go. I'll drive. Russell, talkative and eager, spotted the car and said, wait, is that a Lamborghini Aventador? Ryu asked, recognize it? Russell replied, do you think my mountain life means I'm out of touch? This car right here is my dream car. Amidst playful banter, the two drove away. Then Ryu asked him, any particular place you'd like to visit? He replied, I'd prefer somewhere tranquil for a chat. At that moment, Ryu glanced at his watch, pondering for a moment, and he inquired, lunchtime already? Shall we grab a bite? Russell replied, yes, please. I've always wanted to try authentic Korean cuisine. Ryu said, then let me take you to my favorite spot. And he led Russell to a serene Korean restaurant nestled in Heavenly Demons Hotel. Thanks to a precautionary reservation, they were seated without delay. Then Russell said, this place is so peaceful. Is it a Korean eatery? Ryu smiled and said, you could say that. The array of dishes served was impressive, eliciting a look of awe from Russell at each course. And he said, this variety is astonishing. I've never experienced such a meal in my life. Ryu said, are you enjoying it? That's great. Dig in. It's on me. Russell said quickly, no, Mr. Ryu, I can't keep owing you. Let me cover this. Ryu inquired, sure you can afford it? It's a bit pricey here. Russell spoke with the confidence of a billionaire. How much are we talking? Ryu said, around 500 pounds per person. Hearing the price, Russell almost died of shock and asked himself, why so costly? What could possibly justify 500 pounds? He expected a bill no more than 30 pounds. Then Russell masked his shock and replied, I'll handle it. No issue. Don't worry. Though Russell had been frugal, spending money that wasn't his in the first place wasn't a waste in such a situation. After all, the money Russell was spending had originally come from Ryu. Reading his thoughts, a smile appeared on Ryu's lips, and he said, Russell, don't fret over the bill. In exchange, can you repair my item like before? Russell said, the durability? Absolutely. Just hand it over. And he promptly fixed the bead of eternity and returned it. Ryu said, thank you, I'll take care of the bill. Russell said, I feel like I haven't done enough for you. Ryu said to him, no worries. By the way, you mentioned a near-death experience? He said, oh, about that. Recounted a rather ordinary tale. He had formed a party as suggested, hunted for 6 hours, and then fought the boss, narrowly escaping demise. And he added, if I hadn't followed your advice to level up, things could have been dire, right? Ryu smiled and said, I'm glad to have been of help. Did you level up much? He said happily, I'm now level 29. Hearing that, Ryu said to himself, Oh, he reached Heavenly Demon's level. In fact, as a blacksmith, Russell wasn't naturally suited for hunting. However, his skill in enhancing and repairing weapons was invaluable to his party members. It's akin to being a buffer. Then suddenly Russell said, "But I must confess, I feel out of place at times. Can I truly claim to be among the top blacksmiths? It's hard to believe," Ryu said with confidence. "With effort, anything is possible. And with my guidance, you can achieve even more." Russell laughed and said, "Your words alone give me strength. With a prophet's support, what's there to fear?" Then he said, "But you must come from an affluent family, Mr. Prophet. You're young, drive a fancy car, and even last time you paid me handsomely." Ryu smiled and said, "Wealthy family?" "No, I was just fortunate. If someone with foresight can't make this much, it'd be a waste, right? But soon, you'll be wealthy too." Russell inquired, "Because of the stocks?" Ryu said, "Yes. Did you invest in that company I recommended?" He replied immediately, "I opened an account and invested more than half of what you suggested." Ryu said, "Smart move. With that investment, you won't need my financial support in the future." Russell asked again, "But is that company really a sure bet?" Ryu replied with confidence, "Absolutely. That's why I advised you to invest." Russell also inquired about the nature of this company. Ryu was surprised and asked him, "You invested without researching?" He laughed and said, "I trusted your prophecy. I figured it would be safe." As they neared the end of their meal, Ryu suggested, "Shall I take you to the company? It's not far from here." He said, "Sure, let's go." After settling the bill, they headed to Heavenly Demon's office in their car. And when they arrived, Ryu said to Russell, "Here we are." Seeing the signboard of Cheonma Consulting was replaced by Player Place, Ryu said to himself, preparations seem almost complete, and unannounced visits were no issue. After all, as the top executive, Ryu Min virtually owned the company. Then Russell said, "This is where I put 70% of my fortune, right?" "Oh, I mean your money, not mine." Ryu said, "That's your money, Russell. Feel free to use it," he said happily and gratefully. "Only a prophet could be so kind. You're an angel." "Wow." Russell's foreigner-like gestures made Ryu chuckle. Then he said to Russell, "Isn't that phrase more of a curse than a compliment these days?" Russell said, "Oh, is that how it is?" Then Ryu asked, "But with only 30% left, can you manage?" He replied, "It's tight, but I'll manage." Ryu added, "I'll withdraw some cash later. 10,000 pounds should tide you over, right?" Russell replied quickly. "Wow, of course." Ryu smiled and said, "Aren't you even going to pretend to refuse?" Russell, foregoing even a token protest, just laughed. Then he asked, "But is it all right to just walk into a company like this?" Ryu replied, "It's fine. I may not be the CEO, but it's essentially my company." Russell was shocked and inquired, "Is the company you advised me to invest in?" Ryu said, "Yes. I am the actual owner of this company." And when Russell heard a detailed story from Ryu, he said in amazement, "Wow, did you really rake in that much from the lottery?" Ryu said, "Yes, I managed to amass quite a fortune, rivaling even Powerball." And since Russell was talkative, he didn't waste this precious opportunity and asked Ryu what came next. "How did you employ that wealth?" Though it seemed like Ryu was boasting, Russell's persistent questioning left Ryu with no choice but to reveal the whole story, and he went on to explain how he converted his